The Body Know, Episode 26, Mirror Neurons in Relationship. Welcome back to The Body Knows. When we talk about relationships, whether between lovers, friends, families, or even strangers in a crowded space, we often think in terms of words, agreements, or choices. We assume connection lives in conversation, decisions, and logic. But beneath all of that, at a level most people never consciously notice, our nervous systems are constantly speaking to each other. They whisper through breath, posture, tone, and micro-expressions. They align and misalign, resonate and dissonate in ways that can create intimacy, escalate conflict, or spread collective moods like wildfire. This is the hidden synchrony of human life, the way our bodies mirror one another. And at the heart of this mystery are what scientists have called mirror neurons. First observed in monkeys in the early 1990s, these brain cells fire not only when we act ourselves, but also when we watch someone else do it. The discovery suggested something profound. The nervous system is built not just for individual survival, but for resonance with others. We are wired to feel what others feel. Think of laughter. One person bursts into genuine, belly-deep laughter, and within moments, everyone nearby starts smiling or chuckling too. Nobody tells them to laugh. Nobody consciously decides to mimic the sound. It happens automatically. Now imagine anger spreading the same way. One person slams a door in rage, the vibration runs through the room, shoulders tense, voices sharpen, and the collective field shifts in an instant. These are not accidents of psychology. They are embodied phenomena, and because they are embodied, they can heal or they can harm. Resonance as healing, on one level, mirror neurons are the basis for empathy. When we see someone in pain, our brain's pain circuits light up as if we ourselves were hurt. When we see someone smile warmly, our own face wants to soften and smile in return. This is why a crying baby often sets off a chain reaction in a nursery. This is why watching someone dance can make us want to move. It's why lovers who gaze into each other's eyes often find their breathing falling into sync without trying. In its purest form, resonance is the language of safety. The body says, I see you, I feel you, I am here with you. It is the nervous system's most primal offering of connection. Resonance is danger, but resonance can also be hijacked. Just as safety spreads, so too does fear. Think of a crowd at a concert that suddenly panics at the hint of danger. Heart rates spike in unison, people run, and chaos erupts. Think of political rallies where anger is amplified, or cults where synchronized chanting overrides individual thought. The same circuits that allow us to empathize also allow us to be swept away, losing ourselves in the emotional current of others. This dual nature, healing or harmful, is what makes resonance so central to both love and abuse, intimacy and manipulation. Scenario: the room of laughter. Picture yourself at a dinner table with friends. One person shares a story, their timing perfect, and the table erupts in laughter. In that moment, you're not analyzing whether the joke is objectively funny, and your body simply joins the rhythm of the group. You lean forward, your chest loosens, your breath synchronizes with the laughter around you. You belong. Now shift the scenario. Imagine the same table, but instead of laughter, someone enters the room tense and angry. Their words are sharp, their movements clipped. Without a single insult directed at you, your shoulders tighten. Your nervous system picks up the charge before your conscious mind makes sense of it. You're no longer at ease. The table is no longer safe. This is the hidden synchrony at play, the contagious nature of nervous system states, the unseen dance of daily life. Most of us underestimate how much our moods are not entirely our own. Yes, we carry personal histories, traumas, and triggers, but every day our state of being is also influenced by those around us. A kind smile from a stranger can lift us. A harsh word from a colleague can sink us. Whole communities can rise in solidarity or descend into violence, not because of rational argument, but because of shared embodied resonance. What's striking is that this happens faster than thought. Long before the prefrontal cortex has time to reason, the amygdala and mirror systems are already firing. This means resonance is not something we choose. It's something we manage once it has already begun. That's why cultivating awareness, noticing when we're being carried by someone else's state, becomes so important in relationships and in society. My own awareness of resonance, looking back on my own life, I can see countless times I was swept into resonance without knowing it. In groups where bitterness and gossip flowed, I felt the pull of suspicion and mistrust creep into my own body. In relationships where charm filled the air, I felt relief and warmth that blinded me to red flags. Later, in my healing journey, I began to notice the opposite as well, how my calm presence could sometimes bring others into ease, even without words. This awareness didn't come all at once. It came after years of reflection, of noticing my body's subtle signals, of remembering moments where I acted out of sync with my own truth, because I was entrained to the field around me. Today I trust those signals more. When I sense tension rising in a group, I pause to ask, is this mine or am I resonating with someone else's storm? Why resonance matters in love and healing. When we talk about healing trauma, we often imagine it as a solitary process, journaling, therapy, meditation. but much healing happens in resonance. The way a therapist regulates their own nervous system to provide safety. The way a friend's steady presence helps us calm down after panic. The way a partner's gentle touch or kind words invite us to stay rather than flee. Resonance is also why toxic dynamics are so powerful. If someone consistently radiates anxiety, anger, or withdrawal, our nervous systems adapt to their state. Without awareness, we may find ourselves living in a resonance that corrodes us. And because resonance works faster than reason, it can take years to recognize what has been happening. This is why reclaiming conscious relationships with resonance is so vital. It's not enough to understand trauma in theory. We must feel how our bodies interact with the fields we enter. Philosophy of resonance philosophers have long intuited what neuroscience is only now beginning to map. Heidegger spoke of being with as the ground of human existence, that we are always already attuned to others. Indigenous traditions emphasize the web of relations, where what one person feels ripples through the community. Even mystics across cultures have described resonance as the basis for spiritual union, two becoming one not by dissolving into each other, but by harmonizing in difference. This philosophy underscores a paradox. Resonance blurs the boundary between self and other. We are not as separate as we imagine. And yet, without awareness, resonance can overwhelm individuality, making us vulnerable to manipulation. The task, then, is to learn to participate consciously, to resonate without dissolving, to feel with others without losing the thread of self. A path ahead in this episode. In this episode, we'll dive deeper into the science, stories, and personal experiences of resonance. We'll look at how couples synchronize, how families amplify moods, and how entire societies can fall under the sway of contagious emotions. We'll explore the double-edged sword, resonance as healing when grounded in love and safety, resonance as destructive when exploited by power and coercion. And we'll return, as always, to the personal, because theory only matters if it helps us live differently. My own journey has shown me how resonance shaped not only my relationships, but my sense of self. By recognizing it, I've been able to step out of destructive synchronies and consciously choose the connections that bring peace rather than chaos. This is the hidden synchrony of life, the body's way of speaking to the bodies around it. To understand resonance is to understand why love feels so powerful, why abuse leaves such deep scars, and why collective healing is not just possible, but essential. The science of resonance. What actually happens, cell by cell, circuit by circuit, when two nervous systems catch each other's moods? Why do we smile when others smile, flinch when they flinch, or calm when a steady voice meets ours? This is the physiology of resonance. Before we dive into science, I want to pause and make a note. What I'm about to share gets deep, layers of biology, chemistry, and circuits that might sound abstract. But remember, behind every neurotransmitter and neuron is a lived reality you already know. The knot in your stomach when someone walks into a room angry. The lightness in your chest when a friend smiles. The way laughter ripples through a crowd is like electricity. The science here is not to overwhelm, but to give words to what your body already understands. Think of it as a translation, the nervous system's hidden language, explained in layman's terms, so you can notice what's happening in real time and reclaim choice where before there was only reaction. And what we mean by mirror neurons, and what we don't. In the 1990s, researchers recording single neurons in the macaque premotor cortex, area F5, noticed cells that fired both when a monkey grasped an object, and when it watched another monkey grasp the same object. They called them mirror neurons. In humans, we can't ethically do the same single-cell recordings in healthy brains, so evidence comes from converging methods, fMRI, EEG-MEG, TMS, lesion studies, and behavior, mirror neuron system MNS, candidates in humans, inferior frontal gyrus, IFG, overlaps with Breyer action sequencing speech, inferior parietal lobule, IPL, mapping scene actions to motor schemas, period sulcus, PSTS, biological motion, intention cues, premotor cortex, planning actions you could perform, supportive signatures, EEG-mu rhythm suppression over the sensorimotor cortex during both doing and observing actions. MS over the motor cortex increases excitability in muscles used by the scene action. fMRI coactivation of IFG, IPL when we observe imitate. A careful caveat, in humans, mirror neurons is shorthand for a distributed action, perception coupling network. It is not one magical cell type that explains empathy. It's a system embedded in larger social circuits, insula, ACC, amygdala, mentalizing networks and bodily state regulators, vagus, hypothalamus, 2, the core loop. From seeing to feeling to preparing at its simplest, resonance relies on 3 fast translations. 1. Perception leads to representation. Visual and auditory systems pass biological motion. PSTS, facial muscle patterns, gaze, and voice prosody. 2. Representation leads to motor mapping, IPL, and premotor cortex map what you see onto your motor repertoire. If I lifted that cup, I'd activate these muscles. 3. Motor mapping leads to interoception and state insular and anterior cingulate cortex, ACC. Stitch the as-if action to felt body state, heart, gut, breath. while autonomic networks, vagus, sympathetic chain, adjust your physiology toward the other's state. This is why seeing a wince can make you wince. Hearing a steady, warm voice can lower your heart rate. Watching panic can elevate it. All these actions occur before conscious thought occurs. We do it automatically, through the subconscious, which is always running our bodies. It's the body's bootloader, if compared to a computer, the basic operating system that functions without our conscious thoughts to occur. 3. A millisecond by millisecond walkthrough, real-time scenario. You enter a living room where two close friends are chatting. One turns to you with a broad, genuine smile and soft, "Hey, you made it." Out to 80 milliseconds, sensory ingress, retina, LGN V1, V2 edges, contrast, contours. Auditory, cochlear, brainstem, thalamus A1, syllables, pitch. 80 to 200 milliseconds, biological motion and expression decoding. PSTS recognizes biological motion, the quick head turn, shoulder opening. Fusiform face area, FA passes identity. Amygdala samples valence arousal of the expression. Is this threat neutral or warm? The right posterior superior temporal regions pick prosody, which is tone softness. 100 to 400 milliseconds, action. Perception coupling IPL activates an open posture plus smile schema. IFG premotor simulates your potential smile greeting. Motor cortex excitability rises in muscles you'd use to smile, zygomaticus major, or reach for a hug, deltoid forearm. 300 to 600 milliseconds, autonomic shift co-regulation begins. Ventral vagal, myelinated branch, engages via nucleus ambiguous, leading to heart rate variability increases, breath slows, laryngeal muscles relax, warmer voice. Hypothalamus signals oxytocin release, context dependent, dampens HPA axis, less cortisol because signals scream safe. 600 to 1200 milliseconds. Subjective feeling and intention anterior insular integrates posture plus voice, plus your visceral changes to adult sense of welcome. ACC and VMPFC attach meaning I belong here. Dorsal striatum marks this as a rewarding contingency. Learning, 1.2 to 3.0 seconds. Behavioral resonance, you naturally mirror. Shoulders open, voice softens, breath slows to match the room. Group HRV synchrony can now be measured. EEG shows muse suppression as you enter the shared action space. Key, none of this required a conscious decision. And neuroception, Porges tagged safety first, thought arrived later. 4. Chemistry of connection and disconnection, bonding and soothing oxytocin, facilitates trust, gaze, touch sensitivity, modulates amygdala response to social cues, can soothe in safe contexts. Endogenous opioids, endorphins, underpin warmth of synchrony, e.g. group singing, increase pain thresholds in shared joy. Dopamine, flags prediction and reward, the brain notes this person regulates me, reinforcing approach. Serotonin, mood stability, interacts with prefrontal control and social dominance hierarchies. Acetylcholine, attention and fine-tuning of sensory processing during social learning. B. Threat and mobilization noradrenaline, locus coeruleus, arousal, vigilance, spikes with perceived threat or uncertainty. Cortisol, HPA axis output, sustained stress hormone that biases memory consolidation toward negative high salience events, why sharp words stick. Inflammatory cytokines, chronic interpersonal stress elevates IL-6-TNF, lowering social openness. B. The gatekeeper's amygdala tunes gain on all of the above. Under trauma, it may over-respond, amplifying vigilance and muting oxytocin soothing. Prefrontal cortex, VMPFC, DLPFC, exerts top-down regulation, reframes inhibits impulses, or under load drops out. 5. Circuits in concert. The resonance network thinks did loops, not isolated parts. Action, Heption loop. PSTS to IP-IFG premotor and bidirectional 1. Observing maps to doing. Affect loop, amygdala connection. Bidirectional with the insular and bidirectional between the insular and ACC, body state, and emotion tagging. Meaning loop, VMPFC bidirectional to hippocampus, context and memory. TPJ medial PFC, mentalizing intentions. Autonomic loop, nucleus ambiguous and dorsal vagal complex to heart-lungs voice. Learning loop, ventral striatum, dopamine, and cerebellum, predictive timing of others' movements, voices. Resonance is what happens when these loops synchronize within you and between you and others. X synchrony you can measure within and between bodies, EEG meg, mute, 13 Hz, and beta suppression over sensorimotor cortex during action observation doing. Theta coupling in the frontal midline during shared attention. fMRI, IFG, IPSTS coactivation for action observation imitation, insular ACC for effect sharing. IAS, EEG hyperscanning, interbrain synchrony in frontal temporal regions during joint attention, conversation, and music making. Cardiorespiratory, HRV coupling and breath synchrony in attuned dyads, lovers, therapist, client, parent, or child. Facial EMG, zygomaticus, smile, and corrugator, frown, muscles subtly echo others' expressions within 300 milliseconds. Haven, predictive brains. Resonance as forecasting, the brain is a prediction engine. In social life, it continuously forecasts what others will do next. The cerebellum refines timing predictions of others' movements, voices. IFG-IPL simulate likely actions you could also perform. Insular forecasts interoceptive consequences, how this will feel. Dopamine marks prediction errors. They smiled when I expected anger would lead to an updated safety probability. Resonance accelerates when predictions match. It stutters or protects you when they mismatch. 8. Trauma neurodivergence and resonance sensitivity trauma lowers the threshold for threat detection. Amygdala hypergain means neutral cues can feel sharp. Over time, VMPFC regulatory input may weaken. Autonomic balance tilts towards sympathetic, mobilize, or dorsal vagal shutdown. Result: social fields feel louder. You may absorb others' fear anger faster and exit synchrony abruptly. Autism and ADHD high-level overview, respecting heterogeneity. Some autistic individuals show altered mu suppression or different weighting of social cues, gaze, prosody, and heightened interoception to sensory load, masking further strains autonomic regulation. ADHD often brings dopamine regulation differences, timing variability, and state-shifting challenges. Resonance may flip quickly, engaged leading to overwhelmed. In both, co-regulation that honors sensory needs, lighting, sound, pacing, and directness, makes synchrony safer and more sustainable. Bottom line: resonance is not a moral trait, it's a capacity shaped by load, history, and context. 9. A second life scenario: anger contagion versus a regulating anchor setting. Team meeting. Tension is already mild. A colleague enters, jaw clenched, voice clipped. Arrow to 200 milliseconds. PSTS flags abrupt biological motion. Amygdala spikes. 200 to 500 milliseconds. IPL-IFG simulates the microaggressive hand chop. Your corrugator tightens, micro frown. 500 to 1200 milliseconds. Sympathetic noradrenaline rises. Breath shortens. You lean back. Arms fold. Protect. 1 to 3 seconds. Contagion spreads. Voices sharpen. Interruptions increase. Insert a regulating anchor, you or someone else. Slow exhale, 6 to 8 seconds. Ventral vagal tone inches up. Prosody softens. Let's slow down one thing at a time. Gaze inclusive, posture open, shoulders down, hands visible. Group effect, 30 to 120 seconds. HRV begins to lift in others. Interbrain synchrony restabilizes in frontal bands. The room de-escalates. Key chemicals. Oxytocin modestly rises with perceived fairness allyship. Cortisol begins a downward arc. Resonance cuts both ways. Dysregulation spreads, and so does regulation. And where mirror neurons end and empathy begins, it's tempting to say mirror neurons equal empathy. The fuller picture, MNS, IFGL, PSTS, gives you the motor and perceptual as if mapping, what it would be like to do that action. Affective circuits, amygdala activates the insula and the ACC, give you the feeling tone, what it is like to feel that state. Mentalizing networks, medial PFC, TPJ, posterior cingulate, let you infer intentions, why they're acting this way. Prefrontal control decides what to do with what you feel, help, set boundaries, step back. Empathy requires all of these, plus autonomic capacity to stay present. 11. Development, how resonance is built, or frayed infancy. Caregiver, infant serve and return, gaze, vocal rhythms, tunes the baby's vagal tone, seeding later co-regulation. Sensitive periods, oxytocin receptor expression, synaptic pruning, microglia, and experience-dependent wiring shape how easily the child will synchronize later. Chronic misattunement teaches the body that resonance is dangerous, overcouple to others' moods, or dissociate to avoid them. Adult plasticity is real and safe. Consistent co-regulation can remodel these expectations. 12. Limits, debates, and myths. The honest view. Do humans truly have mirror neurons? Single-unit evidence is limited. What's robust is a mirror-like network. Does mirroring explain language? Probably not alone. Language draws on predictive coding, symbols, memory, and social learning, beyond mirror mapping. Is oxytocin always cuddle hormone? No, context matters. It can amplify in-group bonding and vigilance to outgroups. Is emotional contagion always good? No, without awareness boundaries, resonance can erase self or escalate mob behavior. Synthesis. Resonance is powerful, multi-system, and context-dependent. 13. Putting it together. A layered model of resonance. Layer 1. Perceptual attunement, gaze, micro-expressions, prosody, aster, stes, Phe 1. Layer 2. Action mapping, IFG-IPL primo to simulate the doability of the scene action. Layer 3. Effective inference. Amygdala, the insula, and the ACC generate felt sense and urgency. Layer 4. Autonomic alignment, vagus and sympathetic systems tune heart breath voice toward or away. Layer 5. Meaning and learning, VMPFC, hippocampus striatum encode with this person, this state. Layer 6. Choice and boundary, DFC, VMPFC join, soothe, pause, or step out. When these layers harmonize in safety, connection feels like gliding. When they conflict, e.g., smile plus threat, you feel unease. That's your cue to slow down and verify. 14. A final real-time vignette. Co-regulation in intimacy, you and a partner are lying quietly. One of you exhales longer, the other's breath naturally lengthens. Eyes soften, pupil size converges, fingers interlace. A beta touch fibers travel via dorsal columns up to the somatosensory cortex and insula, where touch becomes a warmth wave. Vagal tone rises together, HRV synchronizes. Endorphins increase, oxytocin supports trust and gaze. Prediction error shrinks your brain's resources, spending fewer resources guessing the other's next move, and more on restorative processes. The felt sense is not fireworks, it is density, quiet coherence. This is a resonance used for healing. 15. Why this matters for the rest of the episode and the arc in part 3 will show how shared states escalate, family dinner souring, team tension rising, step by step through these circuits. In part 4, we'll bring resonance into love and sex, how breath, gaze, and safety interlock, and how attachment mismatches scramble the loop. In part 5, we'll scale up to collectives, rallies, choirs, and mobs as the same physiology expands across many bodies. And throughout, we'll keep returning to practice, how to enter resonant fields wisely, anchor them toward safety, or exit when they tilt toward harm. Resonance isn't a parlor trick of the brain, it's the social language of the body. When we learn its grammar, action mapping, affect inference, and autonomic alignment, we can participate consciously, joining what heals, declining what harms, and offering our own nervous system as a steadier instrument in the orchestra we all share. So when we talk about mirror neurons and resonance, we're not just listing brain areas and chemicals. We're naming the invisible threads that tie us together, threads that can soothe or strangle, depending on the field we enter. And this brings us to the darker side of resonance, when moods and states spread not toward safety, but toward dysregulation. How one person's withdrawal, silence, or coldness can ripple through another's nervous system as though life itself were at stake. That's where we'll go next, in part 3, into the physiology of withdrawal, abandonment, and the craving cycle it sets in motion. Because to understand healing, we also have to understand how the body falls into freefall. Shared moods and emotional contagion picture a family meal. The food is set, conversation begins, and for a brief moment there's warmth in the room. Then someone walks in late, shoulders tense, jaw tight, irritation radiating before a single word is spoken. They sit down abruptly, cutlery clatters a little louder than usual, and everyone else at the table feels it, not in their minds at first, but in their bodies. The atmosphere shifts like a cloud pulling across the sun. This is where mirror neurons, nervous system synchrony, and embodied resonance play out in everyday life. We do not choose to catch the mood of others. The body does it automatically. Breathing patterns alter, heart rates rise slightly, and facial expressions stiffen. Even silence takes on an edge, step by step, how it spreads one, the spark of tension. One individual arrives dysregulated, maybe stressed from work, maybe still holding anger from an earlier conflict. Their body language communicates more than words. The tight jaw, clipped movements, and narrowed eyes are cues that others unconsciously register. 2. Subtle mimicry. Within seconds, mirror neurons begin firing in those around them. A sibling's shoulders rise slightly, another family member frowns without knowing why, and a child shifts in their chair. This isn't deliberate, it's automatic echoing, the body rehearsing what it sees. 3. Internal tightening. As mimicry spreads, the group's nervous system begins to tilt toward threat readiness. The sympathetic branch wakes up. Breath shortens, digestion slows, conversation falters. Everyone's body is asking the same question. Are we safe? 4. Escalation or containment. One person may voice irritation, matching the angry arrival's tone. Another might laugh nervously or quickly change the subject, and attempt to fawn, to smooth it over. But unless someone grounds themselves, speaks gently, or creates a shift, the contagion snowballs. Voices rise, chairs scrape, arguments ignite. 5. Resolution or fracture. Sometimes it passes quickly, a joke cuts the tension, a parent firmly redirects. Other times it lingers even after the meal, leaving people exhausted, resentful, or withdrawn. Why does it feel so physical? When one person's body carries stress into a space, the others don't simply notice it. They live it. Our mirror systems mean that another's anger is not just observed, but partially simulated. Muscles brace as though preparing to fight or flee, even if no actual threat exists. The body cannot fully distinguish between their state and our own. This is why a single angry voice can sour a whole evening, or why shared laughter can heal. Emotional contagion is not metaphorical, it's biological. Personal reflections, I remember countless times when this dynamic played out around me. Sometimes in the family, sometimes among friends. Someone would arrive carrying their storm inside them, and before I could think about it, my chest would be tight, my mood altered. In my younger years, I didn't understand this. I thought it was just me being too sensitive, or that I was somehow responsible for fixing the mood. Over time, I've come to see that this is the nervous system's way of keeping us bonded. If one member of the tribe is dysregulated, the rest of the group mirrors it as a form of vigilance. But it's also why these moments used to exhaust me. I'd absorb more than my share of tension, sometimes carrying it home in my body long after the gathering ended. I also noticed the opposite. When someone genuinely arrived with joy, a lightness in their step, eyes alive with excitement, the entire room would brighten. Aisles spread, voices lifted, and food tasted better. I began to see the incredible power of one regulated nervous system to shift many. Contagion as control. This is also why coercive groups and abusive dynamics lean so heavily on atmosphere. A leader doesn't need to shout all the time. Sometimes just a subtle withdrawal of warmth, a silence heavy with disapproval, is enough to pull everyone into compliance. The group feels it in their bodies and adjusts instinctively without conscious thought. At a personal level, I've lived this in relationships. If a partner entered a room cold, dismissive, withholding, I would feel it immediately like a draft running through me. My body would try to mirror, to adapt, to either soften them with care or protect myself by withdrawing. It was never neutral. My nervous system had already shifted before a word was spoken. The crossroads, escalation or healing in those family meal scenarios, there are always two possible directions. One is escalation, the collective nervous system spirals, and everyone walks away a little more fractured. The other is healing. Someone chooses to stay anchored, grounded, and their calm slowly radiates outward. This person becomes the regulator, the one whose presence tempers the contagion. I've tried to become that person where I can. It doesn't mean denying my feelings or pretending all is well, but recognizing that if I can hold my ground, breathe deeply, and speak gently, I don't just heal myself, I shift the field for everyone around me. This is the double-edged sword of mirror neurons. They can escalate fear, or they can amplify calm. The same system that makes us vulnerable to collective anger also allows us to experience collective joy, safety, and connection. And this is where we turn next, not just the moods we share, but the deeper scripts of love, attachment, and resonance that shape how groups and couples live in rhythm with each other. Love, sex, and resonance. There are moments in intimacy when words become almost unnecessary. A glance across the room, the subtle shift of breath, the way one body leans forward and another responds. These micro-movements speak more than any declaration of love. Lovers often talk about chemistry, but beneath that language lies something deeply embodied, resonance. Resonance is what happens when two nervous systems align. It's not just psychological, not just cultural conditioning, but a felt synchrony in the body. Breath slows together, heart rates echo each other, and a rhythm forms that neither person has to think about. This is why intimacy can feel healing when safe or terrifying when mismatched. Breath, gaze, and rhythm science has shown that when couples look into each other's eyes for a sustained period, their heart rates and even micro-movements begin to sync. The pupils dilate in response, sending signals of attraction and openness. Breathing patterns match, sometimes without either partner realizing it. This synchrony creates what feels like a deep connection, the sense of being in tune. When I think back to my own experiences, I remember those moments where connection felt undeniable. The gaze held, my breath slowed, and I could feel the other person's body settling into a rhythm with mine. It wasn't about technique or even intention. It was about allowing our systems to speak to each other. But I've also lived the opposite. Times when my body wanted to slow down and connect, but the other person's nervous system was running too fast, too charged. Instead of resonance, there was friction. My body tightened, my desire dimmed, and intimacy became difficult. This is where resonance mismatches show themselves, not as a failure of attraction, but as a nervous system clash. The felt sense of chemistry, we often use the word chemistry to describe attraction. What's remarkable is how accurate that word really is. In those moments of resonance, oxytocin, the bonding hormone, floods the system, along with dopamine, pleasure, and motivation, creating a cocktail of connection. Norepinephrine heightens focus, making us tune into the smallest shifts in our partner's body. But chemistry isn't always positive. The same resonance that bonds can also amplify anxiety. If one partner carries unresolved fear, the other may unconsciously absorb it. The body says something's wrong here, even if the mind can't explain it. I've learned to trust this felt sense. There were times in the past when I ignored it, when my body said no, but my mind rationalized yes. I thought that if I just gave it time, if I just worked harder at connection, the resonance would come. But forcing it never worked. Chemistry isn't something we manufacture. It's something the body either finds or doesn't. Attachment and resonance attachment styles shape how resonance unfolds. Anxious partners often seek closeness quickly, their bodies tuned to the fear of abandonment. They may lean in, grasp, or flood with affection in the hope of securing a connection. Avoidant partners, by contrast, often pull back when intimacy feels too close, their nervous systems reading closeness as danger. When these two styles meet, resonance falters. One breathes faster, leans in, the other pulls away, the rhythm breaks. The anxious partner feels rejected, the avoidant feels suffocated, and both leave dysregulated. This is why many relationships feel like a push-pull dance, not because of a lack of love, but because the nervous systems can't find their rhythm together. I've been in relationships where this mismatch was painfully clear. My body longed for resonance, but instead I found myself adapting, breathing shallow to match another's tension, holding back when I wanted to move forward. Over time, this eroded my sense of authenticity. I was performing closeness, not living it. But I've also experienced what happens when resonance flows naturally. When two people's systems meet in a place of safety, intimacy becomes effortless. It's not about intensity or fireworks, but about a deep calm. The body says, here I can rest. Sex is co-regulation in its healthiest form. Sex is not just pleasure, but co-regulation. Two nervous systems meet, share signals of safety, and discharge tension. After intimacy, partners often describe feeling lighter, calmer, more at ease. This is the parasympathetic system in action, a body reset through connection. But for trauma survivors, sex can also be dysregulating. Instead of co-regulation, the body may dissociate, leaving the act hollow or painful. The very place where resonance could be healing becomes a battlefield between desire and fear. I've felt both ends of this spectrum. At times, intimacy has grounded me, left me feeling safe, seen, and whole. At other times, words or actions during sex shattered the resonance instantly, leaving me cold, wanting to withdraw, even turning away entirely. In those moments, my body was saying what my mouth struggled to say. I don't feel safe. What I've come to understand is that resonance during intimacy isn't just about physical attraction. It's about nervous system alignment. When my partner and I share a presence, the resonance is there. When it's broken through harsh words, inattentiveness, or unresolved tension, my body shuts down. Intimacy as co-regulation. At its heart, intimacy is not just about bodies, but about nervous systems speaking. Resonance tells us whether love feels like home or like a trap. Chemistry is not only about hormones, but about safety signals exchanged moment by moment. This is why I no longer see intimacy as something to be forced, negotiated, or explained away. If the resonance is absent, no amount of rationalizing will bring it. And when it's present, no effort is needed. It flows naturally. Reflection. Intimacy as resonance. Looking back, I can see how many times I ignored my body's wisdom. I chased connections with people who could not resonate with me, hoping effort would overcome the mismatch. What I learned is that intimacy without resonance leaves the body empty. Now I trust the calm that arises when resonance is real. The slow breathing, the steady gaze, the sense of being both held and free. This to me is intimacy, not fireworks, not drama, but the nervous system's quiet affirmation. You are safe here. And so love and sex are not just emotional or physical acts, but somatic synchrony. Resonance is the body's way of knowing who we can truly meet, who we can rest with, who we can open to without fear. Collective resonance, groups, crowds, movements. There's something both awe-inspiring and frightening about what happens when human beings gather together. A crowd has its own nervous system, its own rhythm, pulse, and mood. If you've ever stood in the middle of a stadium when the whole audience rises to its feet, or been in a protest where the chants seem to vibrate through your chest, you know that this isn't just a metaphor. Our bodies literally sync. This is collective resonance, mirror neurons scaling upward from the individual to the group. The same mechanism that makes us yawn when someone else yawns, or laugh when someone else laughs, suddenly magnifies into a wave. Breath falls into rhythm. Heartbeats quicken or slow in synchrony. Even gestures, the way people sway, the way they move, begin to align. The healing power of collective synchrony. Not all of this is dangerous. In fact, some of the most profound healing I've witnessed comes from shared resonance. Think of communal singing in a church or chanting in a temple. The voices rise together, and the vibration itself seems to soothe the nervous system. Studies in neuroscience show that choir members' heart rates often sync when they sing in unison. Something about breathing together, phrasing words together, allows each person's body to surrender into a collective rhythm of safety. This is why rituals matter. They're not just empty traditions. They are embodied technologies for regulating the nervous system together. In indigenous cultures across the world, ceremonies often include drumming, dancing, and chanting, all ways of synchronizing bodies into a coherent field. You don't have to explain belonging in words when your body feels it in rhythm. I think back to times I've stood with others in stillness, vigils for loss, moments of silence for grief. The absence of sound was itself a resonance. Our nervous systems are tuned not to noise, but to stillness. And that too was powerful. The danger of the mob, but resonance cuts both ways. What heals in one setting can harm in another. The same mirror neuron machinery that binds a choir in harmony can whip a crowd into violence. Mob psychology has long been studied, but when you look at it through the nervous system, it makes frightening sense. One person shouts, another follows, bodies stiffen, adrenaline spikes, and soon the whole group is vibrating at the frequency of aggression. In these moments, the individual conscience often collapses. People do things in mobs they would never do alone, because the nervous system is no longer anchored in the self. It is being carried along by the wave of the group. This is why cults work. This is why authoritarian leaders rely on rallies and mass spectacles. They are not just speaking to minds. They are hijacking nervous systems. When I studied this dynamic for the Inversiverse, I began to see how much of politics and media relies on nervous system resonance. Repeated slogans, chants, even the pace of delivery, they're not only persuasive at a cognitive level, They literally entrain our bodies. I've watched footage of rallies where the chants were almost indistinguishable from the call and response of religious worship. The difference was the object of devotion, a thin line between belonging and entrainment. This brings up a philosophical question. Is the self ever truly separate from the group? Neuroscience increasingly suggests that our brains are wired for sociality. Our mirror neurons fire, even when we simply observe another person moving. Loneliness itself registers in the brain as pain, activating many of the same neural pathways as physical injury. This means that being outside resonance hurts. It's no wonder, then, that people are willing to surrender individuality for belonging. To stand apart is to feel pain. To merge into the group is to feel relief. And yet, there is danger in losing oneself entirely. The cult, the mob, the extremist movement all prey on this basic biology. They weaponize our need for resonance. I know in my own life I felt the pull of groups that didn't sit right with me. On the surface, it felt good to belong. The laughter, the in-jokes, the sense of being part of something. But underneath, my gut twisted. The resonance wasn't clean. It was laced with manipulation, gossip, and cruelty. It took me years to recognize that not every form of belonging is safe. Some synchrony is poison. The question of agency. Here's where the philosophical reflection deepens. Do we choose resonance, or does resonance choose us? If my nervous system is wired to mirror others, then how much free will do I really have in a crowd? Heidegger suggested that human beings are always thrown into a world of others. Our being is co-constituted by those around us. Buddhism echoes this in the teaching of interdependence. We are not isolated selves, but part of a web. Yet both perspectives also invite awareness. If I know that resonance is inevitable, then my task is not to escape it, but to discern it. Which fields do I step into? Which groups do I allow my body to entrain with? That is where freedom lies, not in refusing resonance altogether, but in choosing where to direct it. The double-edged sword of technology. In our age, resonance no longer requires physical presence. Social media has become a machine of disembodied resonance. A viral tweet, a trending video can shift moods across millions within hours. We laugh together at memes. We rage together at headlines, even though we are physically alone. Our mirror neurons don't seem to distinguish between live and mediated bodies. This is why online outrage can feel so consuming. You might be sitting quietly at home, yet your nervous system is syncing with a wave of collective anger. The body tightens, cortisol rises, breath shortens. It's no different, physiologically, than being in a crowd. And yet, because you are alone, you may not notice what's happening. It feels invisible, but the toll is real. At the same time, online resonance has created communities of healing. Survivors of abuse sharing stories, people supporting each other through struggles, and global vigils carried out on Zoom. Here too, the nervous system feels less alone. Resonance, again, is neutral. It depends on how it is channeled. Choosing resonance. If there's one thing I take from reflecting on collective resonance, it's that awareness changes everything. When I walk into a group now, I pay attention to my body. Does my chest tighten or expand? Do I feel more grounded or more scattered? My nervous system tells me faster than my mind whether the field is safe. I've learned to respect that, to step back when the synchrony feels toxic, to lean in when the rhythm feels supportive. This doesn't mean isolating myself, quite the opposite. It means I seek out groups, communities, and relationships where resonance lifts rather than drains, where synchrony builds compassion instead of cruelty. Because at the end of the day, the nervous system is social by design. We will always sync. The real question is, what do we want to sync with? Personal reflections, feeling the field. When I look back on my life, I can see that resonance has been one of the most powerful forces shaping my nervous system. At times, it has felt like being pulled into currents I didn't even realize were flowing. At others, it has felt like anchoring others when their worlds were collapsing. Only now, with years of reflection, self-study, and spiritual awakening, do I understand that much of what I once mistook for mood swings, strange atmospheres, was, in fact, the field, the collective nervous system I was swimming in, swept into collective moods. I remember moments in childhood when my body felt heavy with emotions that weren't mine. If the room was tense, I was tense. If my parents were arguing, I could feel my stomach clench even before their voices rose. My nervous system was scanning not just words, but micro-expressions, tones, and gestures. It was like my whole being was wired as an antenna. I didn't have the words for it then, but looking back, I realize I was resonating. This sensitivity followed me into adulthood. There were times I found myself swept into group dynamics almost against my will. In workplaces, if the culture was cynical, I started to feel drained even when I came in motivated. In friendships, if the energy turned gossipy or competitive, I felt myself tighten and play roles I didn't want to play. It was as if the field dictated my state, and I carried that state home with me long after the conversations ended. That's the danger of unconscious resonance. You walk into a field, your body syncs, and before you know it, you're living in moods that aren't even yours. For years, I didn't know how to separate my own emotions from the collective ones around me, anchoring calm. But there were also moments where I noticed the opposite, my calm influencing others. In Unfiltered Human, I spoke about experiences where, by staying grounded, I felt others settle around me. Even when conversations were tense or situations heated, something in my presence seemed to offer a counterweight. I didn't understand why this happened at first. I thought maybe it was luck or personality. But now I see it as resonance in action. Just as fear and anger can ripple outward, so can calm and compassion. When I choose to breathe deeply, to slow my responses, to anchor myself in awareness, I'm not just helping myself, I'm influencing the field. This realization has been empowering. It means that even when I cannot control the collective, I can contribute to its tone. I can choose to resonate with safety rather than fear. I can be part of shaping the field instead of being swallowed by it. Times of silence, times of overwhelm, I've also reflected on the extremes. There were times when collective resonance overwhelmed me to the point of collapse. Large crowds, loud arguments, environments where chaos reigned, my nervous system would go into shutdown. Dissociation, withdrawal, and silence became my way of protecting myself. Other times I would push against the tide, trying to hold firm, only to end up exhausted. That exhaustion often turned into frustration or anger. It wasn't just my own feelings I was carrying, it was the amplified weight of everyone else's unresolved emotions. This was especially true in relationships where triangulation, projection, or gaslighting created unstable fields. My body was working overtime to make sense of contradictions, and the field kept pulling me in. In My Inner Child Was Broken, I explored how much of my early sensitivity to others came from survival. I had to scan the environment constantly to feel safe. That scanning never really switched off. Even today, I feel the temperature of a room almost instantly. The difference is that now, instead of seeing it as a burden, I see it as information. This is where awareness makes all the difference. In the past, I felt at the mercy of collective moods. Now I know I can choose. I can decide which resonance to enter and which to step away from. I've left situations where the resonance was toxic, even if walking away cost me relationships or opportunities. I've stayed in others where the resonance felt nurturing, even if it looked unconventional from the outside. To me, this is part of reclaiming agency. I no longer ignore the subtle cues of my nervous system for the sake of fitting in. One powerful shift has been learning that resonance doesn't always require participation. Sometimes holding my boundary is enough. I can be present in a group without letting the field dictate my state. Breath, grounding, inner awareness, these are my anchors. They remind me that while resonance is real, it is not destiny. Awareness as responsibility, but with awareness also comes responsibility. I can't pretend I don't influence others anymore. I know my moods ripple outward. If I enter a room tense, that tension spreads. There is a responsibility in being conscious of the field you help create. This doesn't mean I have to be perfect or constantly serene. It means I am accountable to my own nervous system. I don't shame myself for being anxious or angry, but I also recognize the power of honesty. Sometimes, naming what I feel breaks the spell. Instead of unconsciously resonating, the field can shift into authenticity. I've seen this happen in relationships too. When I've admitted vulnerability, it has often softened the other person. The resonance changed from defensiveness to openness. That doesn't always happen, of course, but it happens often enough that I trust it. Feeling the field is not just about surviving resonance. It's about learning to discern, to choose, to influence. My journey has been one of moving from unconscious sinking, being swept into currents I didn't understand, to conscious resonance, where I can decide how and with whom I share rhythm. And as I look back across the Inversiverse, My Inner Child Was Broken, and Unfiltered Human, I see this thread running through all of them, the longing to be seen not just as an isolated individual, but as part of a web. The difference now is that I can honor that web without losing myself in it, because resonance is not the enemy. It is the language of connection. The task is to make sure we are fluent enough to know when it heals and when it harms. Practices for conscious resonance. Resonance is one of those forces that can feel invisible until you start paying attention. It is subtle, yet powerful. It is what makes laughter spread in a room, what makes silence feel heavy, what makes a crowd chant as if they share one voice. For much of my life, I didn't know this language consciously. I just lived inside it, tossed about by moods, atmospheres, and the unspoken currents of connection. But the more I learned about my nervous system, the more I realized that resonance isn't something that happens to us. It's something we can participate in consciously. We can choose how to respond, whether to sync or desync, whether to amplify a field or ground it. And those choices make all the difference between being consumed by collective moods and being empowered within them. In this part, I want to explore some practices that have helped me reclaim resonance. They are not about control, because resonance isn't something you can dominate or manipulate without cost. Instead, these are about awareness, choice, and alignment. living in the field with presence rather than unconscious reaction. Somatic awareness, tracking shifts in real time. The first practice is simply noticing. Our bodies are always responding to others, whether we are aware of it or not. Heart rate changes, breath quickens or slows, shoulders tighten, skin flushes, stomach knots. These are not random. They are the nervous system syncing to what is around us. One of the most useful skills I've developed is learning to track those shifts in real time. For example, if I walk into a room and suddenly feel my chest tighten, I pause and ask, is this mine or is this resonance? Sometimes the tension belongs to me. Maybe I'm carrying stress from earlier. Other times, it's the field speaking through me. The awareness itself doesn't solve everything, but it creates a space between sensation and identification. It reminds me that just because I feel something doesn't mean it originates inside me. This kind of awareness is particularly powerful in conflict. When voices rise, I now pay attention to my own breath and heart rate. I can see how quickly my body wants to mirror the escalation. That awareness gives me the option to step back, slow down, or anchor in a different rhythm. Breath and grounding, tools to desync. Once I notice resonance, the next step is having tools to regulate myself. Breath is the simplest and most immediate. A slow exhale, a deeper inhale, a pause at the bottom of the breath. These send signals of safety to the vagus nerve. And when my body signals safety, I stop being pulled into fear-driven resonance. Grounding is another anchor. Feeling my feet on the floor, pressing my hands together, leaning back into a chair. These remind my nervous system that I am here, in the present, not lost in someone else's storm. Sometimes I silently say to myself, this is their state, not mine. That small sentence has carried me through many overwhelming moments. What I love about these practices is that they are subtle. Nobody needs to know I'm doing them. They don't require dramatic withdrawal or confrontation. They are invisible acts of sovereignty, reminders that I can remain present without losing myself. Journaling collective triggers and responses. For much of my life, I made mental notes rather than written ones. I carried reflections in my head, replaying situations, noticing patterns, trying to understand why certain environments drained me while others nourished me. Later, I came to see the value in writing them down, not as obsessive analysis, but as a way of externalizing what otherwise loops inside. Journaling about collective triggers can reveal remarkable patterns. For instance, I noticed that certain kinds of group dynamics, competitiveness, or unspoken hierarchies consistently left me feeling unsettled. Other dynamics shared creativity, authentic conversation, singing or chanting together, left me energized. Writing those experiences gave me clarity. It showed me that resonance isn't random, it follows scripts. Even if you don't write every day, capturing key moments can be enough. A single sentence like I felt heavy after that call, or I noticed my calm shifted the room can over time reveal the language of your nervous system. It's less about recording events and more about learning to trust what your body already knows. Spiritual and creative practices resonance isn't just biological, it's also spiritual. Across cultures, rituals of sound, movement, and shared presence have been used to shape resonance intentionally. Chanting, drumming, dancing, prayer circles, meditation groups. These are ways communities synchronize not by accident, but by design. I've experienced this myself in moments of deep spiritual practice. There's something extraordinary about feeling your breath align with others. Your voice blends into a chant. Your body moves in rhythm with a circle. It's more than performance, it's communion. The nervous system feels held safe, expansive. Creative practices can serve a similar role. Singing with others, I enjoyed when I used to go to Old Trafford and watch Manchester United play, writing in community, collaborating on projects. These create resonance fields that are generative rather than draining. When done with awareness, they become more than hobbies. They become practices of nervous system care, collective practices. Resonance as healing. One of the most powerful shifts for me has been realizing that resonance can be reclaimed collectively. Abuse, coercion, and manipulation often rely on hijacking resonance, creating fields of fear, dependency, or shame. But the same force can also be used to heal. When communities gather intentionally, they can create resonance fields of compassion and safety. I've seen this in group therapy, in activist circles, in support networks. One person's vulnerability can open the door for another's. One person's calm can stabilize many. In these moments, resonance stops being a trap and becomes a source of liberation. For me, this is also deeply tied to the inversiverse. Much of what I've explored there is about exposing how systems manipulate resonance through media, politics, indoctrination, and how awareness can break those spells. But awareness alone isn't enough. I also need practices to create new fields, to model resonance that heals rather than harms. Choosing resonance, a daily practice. Perhaps the most important practice of all is remembering that resonance is a choice. Not always an easy one, not always a conscious one, but a choice nonetheless. Every day we decide which conversations to join, which rooms to enter, and which fields to inhabit. We decide whether to mirror fear or to anchor calm. For me, this has meant being more discerning about where I give my energy. I no longer stay in environments that consistently erode my nervous system. I prioritize spaces where authenticity, compassion, and creativity are valued. This isn't about perfection. Every group has its challenges, but it's about intention. If I know the field is rooted in care, I can engage with more trust. And when I find myself in a field that feels toxic or destabilizing, I remind myself I can leave. I can breathe. I can ground. I can choose. That choice has been one of the most liberating discoveries of my healing journey. The practices of conscious resonance aren't complicated. They don't require years of training or elaborate rituals. They are as simple as noticing breath, feeling your feet, writing your reflections, choosing your spaces. But simplicity doesn't mean insignificance. These small acts are revolutionary when lived consistently, because resonance is constant. We cannot escape it. What we can do is meet it with awareness, participate with choice, and contribute with intention. And when we do, resonance shifts from being a force that unconsciously shapes us to a language we can consciously speak. For me, this has been one of the most profound transformations of my life, moving from being swept into fields that harmed me, to creating and choosing fields that heal. And if enough of us do this, the field of society itself can change. Integration and reflection. As we've journeyed through this episode, I've kept coming back to one simple truth. Resonance is not optional. It's happening all the time. Whether I notice it or not, my nervous system is syncing, mirroring, absorbing, and reflecting the states of those around me. What has changed for me over the years is not whether resonance happens, but whether I live inside it unconsciously or consciously. And that shift has made all the difference. Resonance as the nervous system's social language. The more I've studied the nervous system, the more I've come to see resonance as its primary language. Before we form words, before we make choices, before we even know ourselves as separate beings, our bodies are already resonating. A baby cries and the mother's body responds with milk let down. A child laughs and the room lights up. A group falls silent and everyone feels the weight of it. It's tempting to think of resonance as just emotions, but that's too shallow. It's biology, chemistry, and electricity. It's mirror neurons firing, vagal pathways engaging, hormones like oxytocin and cortisol flooding the system. It's the deep, embodied truth that connection is not just an idea, it's a state we share. Unconscious contagion versus conscious connection. But resonance can play out in very different ways. When I wasn't aware of it, I was often swept into moods that weren't mine, conflicts I didn't start, and fields of tension I didn't create. I would leave drained, confused, wondering why I felt so heavy. Becoming conscious of resonance hasn't made me immune, but it has given me agency. Now I can choose. I can notice when I'm sinking with fear and decide whether to stay there. I can ground myself in calm, knowing that doing so offers others an anchor. I can leave a room when the field is toxic, without guilt because I know my presence matters, and so does my absence. This is the difference between unconscious contagion and conscious connection. One leaves me powerless. The other reminds me of my responsibility, to myself, to others, to the collective field we all co-create. I think back to moments in my own life when resonance was overwhelming. Clouds where fear spiraled out of control. Relationships where moods bounced back and forth until neither of us knew whose feelings were whose. Times when silence in a room felt like suffocation, when anger spread like wildfire, when despair felt contagious. And I also think of the moments when resonance healed me. Singing with others, feeling our breath align, laughing with friends until we couldn't stop, sitting with someone in pain, and feeling how a calm presence helped them find ground. These moments remind me that resonance itself is neutral. It can harm or heal, depending on awareness. And that's why this work matters, not just for me, but for all of us. Collective resonance, the wider lens. When I zoom out, I see resonance at play not just in personal relationships, but across whole societies. Media creates resonance fields of fear or outrage. Political rallies sink bodies into unity or hostility. Cultural rituals bond communities together for survival. If resonance is the nervous system's social language, then societies are speaking all the time, whether in whispers or in roars. And just as with individuals, the question is, are we resonating unconsciously, driven by fear and manipulation? Or are we resonating consciously, creating fields of compassion, justice, and care? Reclaiming resonance as liberation. For me, integration is about reclaiming resonance, not avoiding it, not fearing it, but participating in it consciously. I don't believe we were meant to live isolated, disconnected, self-contained lives. Our nervous systems are wired for connection. But we were also not meant to be enslaved by unconscious contagion, swept along by whatever field is loudest. The middle path, conscious resonance, is where freedom lies. It's where love becomes sustainable, where communities become resilient, where healing becomes possible. And perhaps most importantly, it's where my own nervous system no longer feels like a liability. For years, my sensitivity felt like a burden. Now I see it as a gift, To notice resonance is to notice life itself. To feel deeply is to live deeply. And to choose consciously is to live freely. So as I close this section, I return to a question I keep asking myself. What field am I creating? Not just what field am I entering, but what field radiates out of me through my breath, my words, my presence? Because resonance is never one way. It's always reciprocal. And that means I'm never just a passive receiver. I'm also a transmitter. What I carry matters. That realization has been both humbling and empowering. Humbling, because I see how easily my own fear or frustration can ripple into others. Empowering, because I see how my calm, my compassion, my authenticity can ripple just as strongly. That is the heart of integration, remembering that resonance isn't just something I undergo. It's something I live, shape, and offer. And in that offering, healing becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Resonance as choice, resonance as power. As I draw this episode to a close, I want to pause and take in just how far we've traveled together. What began with a simple observation that bodies echo each other has unfolded into an exploration of love, sex, groups, politics, spirituality, and healing. At its core, mirror neurons are just a biological mechanism. But as we've seen, their effects ripple through everything: how we connect, how we fight, how we heal, and how we harm. They are not just about imitation, they are about resonance. And resonance is the nervous system's most primal, most powerful language. From unconscious contagion to conscious connection. The danger with resonance is not that it exists, but we forget it does. When I'm unaware, I become a sponge. Someone's anger fills me before I can say no. A crowd's fear hijacks my body before I can breathe. A partner's silence turns into my despair. Unconscious resonance is contagion. It spreads without reflection, without consent, without pause. But awareness changes everything. The moment I notice resonance, I can choose. I can ask myself, is this mine? Do I want to carry this? Do I want to amplify it or soften it or step away entirely? This is where healing begins, not by erasing resonance, but by reclaiming it as a conscious connection. Resonance as power, for good or harm. One of the hardest truths I've had to accept is that resonance can be weaponized. Abusers know how to flood the nervous system with charm, then withdraw, then re-engage. Propagandists know how to stir rage or fear, synchronizing crowds into obedience. Entire industries are built on manipulating resonance, advertising, politics, media. But this same power is also our hope. Because resonance is also what makes healing possible. It's what allows laughter to ripple through a room, what allows song to stitch a community together, what allows love to calm a child's tears. The very thing that enslaves us when unconscious becomes our liberation when conscious. My own journey with resonance. For much of my life, I felt at the mercy of resonance. I didn't have words for it, only the experience. Walking into a room and feeling overwhelmed, being swept into someone else's chaos, noticing my body tense without knowing why. As I became more self-aware, I began to see patterns. I realized I wasn't just imagining things. My body was telling me truths long before my mind caught up. The nervous system reads tone, rhythm, breath, and mood faster than thought. In relationships, I saw how much resonance mattered. Sometimes it healed, a shared laugh, a touch that grounded me, the comfort of being truly seen. Other times it harmed, accusations projected onto me, moods I absorbed that weren't mine, silences that cut deeper than words. What shifted everything was recognizing that my sensitivity wasn't a weakness. It was awareness, and when I learned to trust that awareness, I found freedom. Now, instead of resenting my nervous system, I listen to it. When I feel resonance pulling me toward despair, I pause. When I feel resonance lifting me toward joy, I let it. When I feel resonance becoming toxic, I step back. And perhaps most importantly, I try to notice what resonance I create. Collective responsibility. The fields we build resonance isn't just personal, it's collective. Every group creates a field. Every community shapes the nervous systems within it. Every society lives in a resonance loop. That means we all carry responsibility. Not the kind that shames, but the kind that empowers. My calm can ripple out. My authenticity can set others free. My compassion can anchor a whole group. It doesn't mean I have to save everyone, but it does mean I'm never powerless. If resonance can spread fear, it can also spread love. If it can spread chaos, it can also spread calm and clarity. If it can break, it can also heal. And when enough of us choose conscious resonance, we begin to shift not just ourselves, but the collective. Looking ahead, conflict, and repair. And this brings us to where we're heading next. Because resonance doesn't only happen in harmony, it also breaks. We've all felt it. A conversation that spirals, a relationship that fractures, a community that erupts. Conflict is inevitable because resonance means we affect each other deeply, and deep connections always bring friction. The question is not whether conflict will come. At will. The question is whether conflict destroys or whether it becomes a doorway to deeper repair. In episode 27, Conflict and Repair, we will explore what happens in the body during arguments, ruptures, and reconciliations. We'll trace how fight-flight states take hold, how mirror neurons amplify escalation, and how co-regulation makes repair possible. Because just as resonance can wound, it can also heal. And repair is where that truth comes alive. So as I close episode 26, I want to thank you for listening, for reflecting, for walking this path with me. These aren't easy truths to hold, that we are so permeable, so affected, so vulnerable. But they are also beautiful truths, that we are never alone, that we are wired for connection, that healing is always possible in a relationship. Remember, resonance is not something happening out there. It is happening in you, through you, with every breath and every glance. And every moment, you have a choice to let it control you unconsciously, or to step into it consciously. My hope is that together we keep choosing awareness, compassion, and authenticity, because those choices ripple further than we know. Until the next episode, thank you for being here, thank you for your courage, and thank you for walking this path with me. You've been listening to The Body Knows. James Miller.